Okay, let's get started. If you have not yet shared the new thing that you're doing, that's totally fine. You can keep that rolling into the chat box. I did also, again, share the link to the slide deck that we're going to be using today. If for some reason you would much prefer that I share a screen, that's totally fine. We can do that too, but we'll be doing some things in the slide deck later on. So figured I'd give you access to it now. All right. I'm Sunny. I use they and she pronouns. I work for Aorta. Most of you are familiar with Aorta, but Aorta is a worker-owned cooperative of facilitators and strategists who are devoted to helping our movements renew a stronger sense of liberatory vision, values, and purpose. We do that through facilitation, coaching, consulting, and education. And so we work to catalyze leaderful movement spaces across the country. I'm sharing that with you very intentionally this morning because we're going to be talking today about missions. We're going to be talking about goals. We're going to be talking about strategies. We're going to be thinking about how do we take this thing that we care about and that we understand is important and vital to our communities, which is building equity, and how do we make it actually happen? So I thought it only fair that I share with you a little bit about sort of like Aorta and how we see ourselves within that scope. Speaking of which, on slide 4, and I'm just going to put it in the chat box one more time because I think someone just joined. This is the slide deck for today. So today you might have noticed in the workshop description that there were a few pretty lofty goals. As I was preparing for this workshop, I was like, I think if we were able to do one of these, that would be fantastic. Also, a wonderful teaching moment, right? A wonderful opportunity for learning. Because we'll also be talking a little bit about what happens when we have like lots of goals and we maybe need some shaping. We need an editing eye, as Tim Gunn would say. But today we're going to practice examining our market missions and our values to understand how they can help us craft equity goals. Does that sound more or less what you came here for today? You can give me an emoji. You can give me a thumbs up. You could give me a verbal, absolutely, Sunny. All of those work. Cool. Awesome. Great. As I mentioned today, we're going to be interacting in a couple of different ways. One is through the slide deck, so you'll have an opportunity to like do some typing into our shared slide deck together. We're also going to be using the chat box, so you are more than welcome to, as like we chat today, like put things in the chat box if you'd like to at any time. That's totally fine. That does not distract me. You're welcome to share resources with each other there as well. And you're also welcome to come as you are today. So if video off is supportive for your learning today, wonderful. Obviously, like it's great to see faces and, you know, I do look at the little Zoom screens, but you are welcome to come as you are. And if you're on video, you are welcome to stretch, to eat, to hang out with your kiddos or your pets. Do whatever you need to do to be most present. We are going to take a break. And my goal is to take that break about halfway through. Oh, I've lost the time that we're going to take that break. So my goal is to take that break in like maybe like an hour or so. It'll be like a quick one, just like a quick 5 to 10 minute break. But we will take a break today, in case you were wondering. All right. Would you, if you don't mind, just in the chat box, because, you know, I think it's important to sort of like understand where everyone in the room is at. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling right now? Like emotionally, energetically. 10 being like, this is one of the better days of my life. Excellent, excellent day. One being, this is not one of the better days of my life. I am not doing great, but I'm here and that's okay. Will you just tell me 1 to 10 how you're doing right now? Okay. Okay. Perfect. Love it. Love it. Oh, wonderful. We're in Hawaii.
They're on Oahu.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad you'll get some family time. Okay. So we've got kind of like a wide variety right now, and that's okay. And I'm asking that too, again, just to sort of like, because we're coming in like fresh today. We're like coming in like with some expediency, with a little bit of like, you know, I'm like, I can't see your faces. I'm just like, how you doing? Okay, cool. Um, I would say I'm probably a 6, just for transparency's sake. Okay, so I'm on slide 5. Um, so we're gonna start with Sunny. Why are we talking about this? What makes you think that this is important to talk about? I'll give you a little bit of framing. Sometimes when we're talking about sort of like organizations as a whole, uh, we talk about sort of like words like equity or diversity or an inclusion as like buzzwords. Sometimes they get thrown around as buzzwords, right? And the reason why they become buzzwords is because oftentimes organizations are using them, but they aren't really sure sort of why or what it has to do with their mission, how it helps them achieve their goal. They don't really have like a shared understanding of what that means, right? Like what does equity mean? What does inclusion mean? What does diversity mean? And sometimes they're kind of like rhetorically incoherent, but we'll just set that aside for a moment, right? Um, yeah. And so oftentimes when we're thinking about like, all right, why is it that sometimes mission statements, equity statements, values, we put a lot of energy into like making them happen, right? We build a lot of consensus around it, but they don't often, well, not often, but sometimes they don't translate into tangible action. And why is that? And that's because we sometimes aren't utilizing them, right? So like the statement itself is powerful for sure. But what's important about having mission statements, values, things like that? What's important about them is like not the document itself, but what's important is the conversation that you're having, right? That's what's going to help you and your organization sort of build a shared understanding of what you mean when you say equity, what you mean when you say anti-racism, what you mean when you say community. It's going to help you sort of develop a shared understanding of what those words mean so that you can actually do something with it, right? Um, okay, so let's actually take a moment right now. And I'm going to give you like 10 minutes or so. I'm going to give you a couple of different instructions, but for now, let's just start with 10 minutes or so. You are going to actually find don't do it yet. Don't do it yet. If you open up a browser, just close it. You're going to find your mission statement or your values. Now, it's okay if like you don't have those handy or if like your market hasn't put those on your website or what have you. That's totally fine. But you're going to locate them to the best of your ability. And if for some reason you aren't able to locate them, feel free to just like use what you think might be true, right? That's totally fine. You're going to have an opportunity to look at your mission right here with everybody else and do a little bit of analysis work. And you can join me on slide 6, by the way. And as you're doing this analysis work, right, the thing that you're going to be looking for are things like specificity. What does this tell me about our market? What does this tell me about what we're hoping to do in the world? What does this tell me about why we think we exist? Because sometimes when organizations don't have this sort of like shared understanding, as I was talking a little bit earlier, a variety of different things can happen. Especially when we start talking about something like equity, right? And I'll go ahead and actually just read to you a few of the things, and you can just silently think, do any of these resonate with me? You don't have to share, you can just silently think. Sometimes what can happen is, first of all, there might be a lack of progress, right? Like it might feel like we're saying the right things to each other when we're having these conversations, but we aren't really taking action, or the action that we're taking feels like it's not really doing very much. There might be one or two dedicated people who are taking on the work either in the organization or as volunteers, and they're like really championing making equity happen in our organization. But if that person leaves, or if that person is out, or what have you, like it's kind of all on that person, and there's not really a lot of shared leadership around it. You might end up tokenizing people of color in your organization or community partners. And they might feel like if they aren't doing the work, it's not going to happen. There might be false starts or a lack of engagement. So you are like, okay, we have this strategy in mind. We have this idea based on our mission about what we're going to do. But nobody shows up to the meeting, or nobody really responds, or you're trying to do this outreach, but it just really doesn't seem like people are showing up, and you're kind of confused why. And then, of course, there might just be a lack of focus, right? So even this idea of equity becomes watered down, or it lacks meaning, because it's kind of like, well, we want everyone in our community to be included in our market. Of course, makes sense. And at the same time, without that specificity, we aren't really able to articulate what it is that we're doing. So we're going to take a moment to look at our mission statements and understand how they can be a touchstone. And you can join me on slide 7. How can our mission statements be a touchstone and not just the sort of like ethereal thing that lives somewhere? So again, a mission can give your market really clear guidance about how you're going to create impact in your community and what impact you want to make. All right, the time has come. I'm going to ask you to actually go and find your mission statement. And I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to do that. And as you're looking through your mission statement, oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, actually, I was going to have you put it in the slide deck, but I'm so glad that you were like, oh, I know it's there. So what you're going to do is in the slide deck, and I can actually copy paste that for you. You're going to share with us, what is your market hoping to do and how? No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. What is your market hoping to do and how are you trying to do it? Now, there's a couple of examples on slide 8. So if you're like looking at your mission statement, you're like, I'm not really sure what this means or how this is translating into this question that Sunny's asking. I actually pulled a couple of examples. So from the St. John and Cathedral Park, the St. John's Market, from their mission statement, they say, we empower our St. John's and Cathedral Park neighbors through community building and equitable people-centered economic development, right? So they're saying who, they're saying what they're doing, and they're saying how they're doing it. I also took a look at the Portland Farmers Markets. And from their mission statement, it says Portland Farmers Market operates world-class farmers markets that contribute to the success of local food growers and producers and create a vibrant community gatherings. As a trade association, success from our vendors is our primary objective. Listening and learning from vendors and shoppers produces outstanding farmers markets where vendors prosper and communities thrive. So one's very short, one's very long. That's actually the least important part of it, right? What we're looking for is, what does your mission statement say that your market is hoping to achieve, and how is it going to achieve that? So I'll give you, we'll see, 7 to 10 minutes. I'll check in right now to access the slide deck and share with us what your market is hoping to do and how. If you wouldn't mind sharing like which market it is, that's helpful. And it's okay if you have to do a little bit of synthesis. It's okay if like you're looking at your slide deck or your mission statement, you're like, I might need to do some wordsmithing. That's totally fine. It's not about like accuracy so much as it is about interpretation. Okay.
Which slide did you want us to put that on?
Oh, so slides 9 through 12, and I can add a couple more if we need to. So I just want to check in on a scale of 1 to 5 right now. How clear are the instructions? 5 being like, yep, super clear. 1 being, I am totally lost. I do not understand what you're talking about, Sunny. Will you put that in the chat box right now?
Oh, can I make a request out loud?
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm, at least for me, I'm only view only on
Oh,
the slide
well,
deck.
that's helpful. Well, I was wondering why I couldn't see people's slides or why I couldn't see people's little icons on the slides. You should be editor now. So if you have it open, you can just hit refresh on this page and it should theoretically allow you to edit the slides. There. Okay. I see some wonderful animal friends. Perfect. Okay. People are copy and pasting. They are typing. Yes. Go ahead, Lisa.
Um, I guess I need some clarity about, like, I could just put our mission statement in there, but you are saying that maybe we should put, like if we're, yeah, but I guess I'd like clarity on, you talked about like, maybe don't put your mission statement in there, you're putting something else.
Yeah. If your mission statement is saying, yep, this is what our market does, and this is how we're going to do it, fantastic. However, based on whatever you were trying to achieve when you were crafting your mission statement or someone else was crafting your mission statement, it might not be that straightforward. And so copy pasting is totally fine, but it's also okay if you need to like zhuzh it a little bit, if you need to like pull it out and extrapolate it. Does that make sense? Cool. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to play some music in the background while you're doing this. If you would not prefer to hear music, you can just turn your sound off, and I will put us. I'll put a back in the chat when we come back together.
Sunny, can I ask another question
Oh yeah, please.
about this? So, I mean, like for me, I think we're in a place where we're actually going to be working on our bylaws again very soon. And
Mhm.
so, like, when I look at our mission statement and think about some of the language that we do actually have around equity and like
Mhm.
aligning those two intentions together,
Mhm.
like our mission statement needs work, but this is like what it currently is.
Okay, cool. That's totally fine. Yeah, and I think like especially if you know you're going to make a change soon or you're like it says this but this is really practically what we're doing or sort of where we're at right now, that's totally fine.
Okay. I would say our current mission statement is probably more closely aligned to like what we're actually doing, but we
Okay.
could like stand
Yeah.
to refresh and also like take action toward like,
Yeah. Yeah.
something new.
And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second too, about sort of like where there's specificity that might be missing or sort of like, you know, how do we make a mission statement actually say something rather than just sort of be a document that's just like sitting there.
Word salad.
I would never, I've never, I've personally. Okay, if you are done copy pasting, I put this in the chat box, but just to let you know, take a look at some of the other mission statements. And I'm particularly curious where, if you're seeing any themes across the mission statements, other than, for instance, like y'all probably have similar ideas about like, we're here to connect vendors with community. We are here to bring amazing food to our community. See if you can notice any similarities or themes coming up. And then also note, where do you see a lot of specificity? Where do you seek clarity? Where do you maybe have some questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the music on for a few more minutes. Okay, I'm going to pause for just a moment. Do you need some more time to take a look at the other mission statements? Or are you like, I'm kind of done? Feel free to come on mic and be like, I need more time. Nah, I'm done. Emojis are also good. Okay. Awesome. All right. Is there anyone who feels like they could benefit from more time? You can put it in the chat box. You can come on mic. Okay, cool. I'm going to give just a couple more minutes. We are not pressed for time. Yeah, I'll give you like another minute. Okay, I am going to take that gentle fade out of the music as our cue, because how often does that happen? It's amazing. It just like faded right out for me. Okay, I'm curious. Ooh, some people have even made some comments. Ah, I love it. I'm curious. What are some themes that you see across the different mission statements? And again, you can feel free to come right on mic if you'd like to. What are some themes that you see?
I think a lot of the mission statements talk about farms and agriculture directly.
Yeah,
And I noticed a lot of them say something along the lines about like healthy food or high quality food, which I'm
interesting.
not a fan of.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Why aren't you a fan?
I just think, especially the word healthy is so, I mean, it depends for each individual person. Like something might be
Yeah,
healthy for one person and not for the other. And to
yeah,
assume that the produce that's being brought to the farmer's market, which is honestly a lot of like Eurocentric vegetables, like is healthy for everyone is just, I don't know, kind of an assumption.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, I think it's worth noting. I noticed some people were kind of like, well, this is what it means, but this is what, it's what we're actually doing, or like, well, maybe we'll add this in the future. And just to say, like, the purpose of this is not to sort of expose all of the like ways in which our mission statements are failing us. That's definitely not the purpose of this time. Like the purpose of this time is to sort of understand like, okay, if we want to do something at our markets, how do we decide? How do we sort of like narrow our focus and our vision and our passion into something? Where are we getting those instructions from? How are we building consensus around what that even means? And so I think it's really great that you are picking up on a word like healthy. I also see the word fresh, which I think is much less morally charged, but I think it is communicating something, right? Like it's saying something about sort of what your market believes and sort of what your whatever your formation looks like in terms of your market, what the organization behind the market is saying is valuable and is important in your community. Now, could you make the argument that that's wordsmithing? You totally could. You could make that argument. And at the same time, if we're thinking about this not just as something that's going to live on a website, or not just something that's like communicating to the public, but something that's actually going to instruct us and guide us about what we're going to do around equity, words become somewhat more important, right? Like it does guide us a little bit. Are there any other themes that folks picked up on that you're like, that's interesting? I see a lot of this going on in the mission statements. Yeah, Lacey, I love making boards do things like this. And sometimes boards are the ones who came up with it, but they were like, yeah, it feels good when I say this word. And I'm like, totally based. And I will go on to a bit of a tangent to say, right? Like there's lots of different theories and philosophies about mission statements, including sometimes funders are asking for them. Sometimes, we're being asked to do them because we want the public to know more about our organization, right? Like there's a lot of different reasons why mission statements are crafted and a lot of different things that they can do. I'm coming at it from a very specific lens. So yeah, the word community comes up in almost all of the statements. What do we make of that? Like, why do you think that is? And anyone can totally answer that question. Why do we think community comes up?
I can talk again.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, if anybody else, feel free to jump in. Excuse me. I think community comes up a lot because markets, I think, start out as community members coming together and kind of starting markets like as volunteers. And so I think the base of that beginning kind of stays with people, and we tend to be usually, unless we're a large tourist market, we tend to be only like serving our immediate area also. And so, yeah, I think a lot of farmers markets balance between supporting farmers and our vendors, and then also supporting the community and making sure we're serving the people in our neighborhood.
Yeah. I
I
see
would
Julie.
add to that, like, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would add to that, like, the gathering place aspect of it, right? Because we have to have like a physical location where people are getting together, and that it's, and does having a gathering location like build community in and of itself? Like, probably not. I mean, it's a mechanism that's
Yeah.
possible for community building. But so there's that aspect of like the actual physical place where people come together, and then like also the relationships that are built between shoppers and vendors. And that aspect of like building community through food. I mean, like the economic mechanism of like purchasing food, but also, you're not just like going to a produce aisle and picking
Right.
your apple. You're like receiving the apple from the person who grew it, which has its own value in community.
Exactly. I saw relationships come up really, really often, which again, that implies something, right? Like that's saying that you think that you, us, we, right, believe that there's something important about the relationship between farmer or a vendor, and the people who are going to eat, consume, or use that product. That's immediately communicating a value, right? In the chat box, I see Julia saying, I notice a lot of overlap with the goal of supporting the health of the local economy, community, and environment. And a lot of them also mentioned specifically supporting farms, right? So again, there's something in that where it's like, it feels important to support farms. It feels important to like do something economically locally and to build an economy that is functioning and structured in that way. So there's already a lot of values that are already embedded in these mission statements, even if sometimes you're like, I don't really know what that means. Like there's already a lot of values being communicated. I see Lacey saying a market needs a community in order to thrive, vendors and business, and a thriving farmers market helps the community feel closer and more connected. So I just want to say that any of the things that just went in this chat box, honestly, could like probably like make it into a mission statement right now. Like what you just said, Lacey, I'm like, oh, that's like a mission statement. But again, this isn't like a workshop about like mission statements, right? Like we're not here just to talk about sort of mission statements and how to make them better or worse or anything. We're here to talk about sort of like, what does that mean in terms of equity? So if you join me down on slide, well, let's say slide 15. Let's say slide 15. One of the things, a couple of the mission statements or values named this, right? But not a lot of them said the word equity. And definitely none of them were like, oh, this is an anti-racist market, or this market is here about dismantling systemic oppression. Now, there might be a variety of reasons why you did or didn't choose that language. And again, like this is not like a moral judgment where it's like, oh, nobody said anti-racism in their mission statement. And therefore, that is the only way to achieve what you're achieving. But at the same time, there is something to be said for specificity, right? Because just like when we were talking about earlier, saying that sometimes when we don't have a shared meaning of the word equity, it becomes a little bit more performative, or it becomes less tangible, it becomes harder to take action on it. Sometimes in an effort to sort of include the whole community, organizations might inadvertently exclude people of color. How does that happen? Well, right, we live in a world in which white supremacy is considered the default. And so when we aren't explicit about sort of who we're here for, who our community even is, and what our values are, it becomes really difficult to make decisions about what we're going to be doing in terms of our markets to support our community. Because when you think about it in the broadest terms, right, like community can mean a lot of different things. And maybe you genuinely do mean that you want the whole community to be welcome at your market. Okay, great. But it's still important to understand who it is we're supporting, who it is we are welcoming, who it is we are hoping to create relationships between in order to do so. So, I think the last thing that I'll say, right, is sometimes when we're neutral about things like race, gender, systemic oppression, what can happen is we end up sort of like defaulting to whatever the hegemonic discourse is, whatever is our society is built upon, whatever it is assumed is sort of the things that we can take for granted, right? And in this current time and place, that is a white supremacist structure. Now, am I saying again that you should all put, for instance, the words anti-racism or systemic oppression or white supremacy or something like that into your market missions? No, I'm not advocating for that. But I do think it's important to look at your missions and see if there are areas where you can be clear about what you see the root causes of inequity being and how you feel like you can sort through those things. So like what you think your market's intervention in that inequity is. So I think a really good example just now is what y'all were talking about when you're like, yeah, we think that farms are important. We think supporting farms are important. We think shifting economies is important. And we think it's important to build relationships and build community. What do you think? And again, this question is to anybody. What do you think that says about what you see the core problems to be with our food systems and our local economies? Like if you were going to reverse engineer it and you're like, okay, our missions are saying that we think it's important to build relationships, for instance, between farmers and vendors and our community. What do we think is broken then?
I don't know if I fully understood the question.
That's fair. Yeah. Let me give you an example about kind of like what I'm thinking about. So I'm on slide 15. So I pulled a couple of mission statements, value statements. I dug around a little bit on different markets websites. So I have up here some values and mission statements that I pulled from the Portland Farmers Market, sort of like Alliance, the St. John Farmers Market, and also the Corvallis Albany Farmers Markets. And so some examples of things that came up in terms of like values or things that those organizations were trying to do with their markets. Portland Farmers Market says nourishment. Food is the heart and soul of our lives. And so access to nutritious food is a foundation for health and human dignity. So what this value is doing, right, is it's making it more clear what they think will build health for our community. The St. John Farmers Market says, our vision is centered around breaking down barriers in order to build a thriving, more equitable neighborhood for all community members. Okay, so this is implying that there's some sort of barrier that is preventing us from building community. Corvallis Albany farmers markets say farmers markets play a critical role in contributing to livable communities and meeting other community needs that have been overlooked in pursuit of a modern food distribution center. Interesting. Okay, so this one has a point of view, right? It's saying that there's something that is overlooked in our, quote unquote, modern food distribution system, and that is making our communities less livable and it's not meeting all of our community needs. That's something to work with right there. The point is that these value statements, mission statements, they're saying something about the inequity that they are seeking to change. And because they're making it explicit, it's then easier to sort of figure out like, okay, so how do we turn that equity into action? Yeah, I see a hand. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I just am looking at the time and we have like 10 minutes left tonight. I want to put a challenge that I'm sitting with in making a more bold mission statement. Which is that like I want to make a more bold mission statement, but the challenge of like maintaining market boarding, like for me, like for my market, like market board engagement, hiring in order to put plans, take action toward a more bold mission statement. It's like I want to do it and I see so many opportunities, and I know that like I also know that the low-hanging fruit is like that economic transaction. Like that is what I know we can deliver on.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, I just wanted to like put that into the room because it's like, oh, I see so many opportunities, and I would feel, I don't know, yeah, I was like, I want to do that. I want to do the work with my fellow board members. And I want to commit to being able to support the market in the way that I can to do that. But it's also like, I feel a pit in my stomach about like, but then what if we don't deliver on that, what we say we're gonna, you know what I mean? It's like,
Absolutely.
anyway, I just wanted to put that in the room for
Yeah.
something that I'm experiencing as we're like talking about these opportunities.
Does that resonate with folks? I'm curious.
Yeah, I have a comment about that.
Yeah.
So we are working on creating a strategic plan. And what we're gonna do is, or what my plan is to create that first. So it's like, oh, here are the step-by-step things that we're gonna be doing for the next 3 to 5 years. And then once we have buy-in about that from our stakeholders and our board, then we can kind of then look at the mission statement and be like, oh, wait, like those don't necessarily add up, but this is what we want to be doing. So maybe we then work on our mission statement. That's my plan, to kind of like get more of like, oh, here are actual steps that we're going to be doing. And then, oh, hey, maybe we could do kind of this more broad work with the mission statement.
Yeah. And I'm aware that like sometimes the structures of your individual organizations might not lend itself to that level of iteration, which is why I'm kind of like, we're starting with the mission statement, but that's like not the thing to necessarily be most attached to. It's not important that it's perfect. It's just important that it's instructive, right? So, you know, for instance, Megan, if you're like, I really want to do this work, I want to do this consensus building work, but ultimately I'm aware that the economic transaction is like the point of intervention that I like to focus on. That's totally fine. You can develop some strategies around that. That's in your mission. That says something. And is there an opportunity to make it more specific? Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to focus on all of it. It's just that the
Exactly.
thing I think we can deliver on is the economic transaction. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
that. I know that I can do that, and some of these other things. And everything is like important. Like in my day job,
Sure.
my jobby job, like we do a lot of thinking and work around how to embed equity into processes and systems that we have in our work, and you know what I mean. So it's like I'm trained in some of this, and I'm like, oh, I want to put it to action here, but it's like, so it's very, very challenging. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Megan, I wanted to say that your question, that fear of being able to deliver on publicly stating some kind of equity statement is something I've heard from a lot of farmers markets, and is part of why is one of the things we were even thinking about in putting this workshop together. So you just kind of articulated the exact thing of why I feel like we're here today. So thank you for doing that.
I'm curious for other people for whom that resonates. Tell me more about that fear that like, what if we can't deliver on that? Or how you're relating to what Megan is saying. I see some like, yes, I'm like, thank you for articulating that. Do you folks want to come on mic?
I think there's a fear of like greenwashing, but like equity washing.
Yeah,
I don't
totally.
know if there's a term for that, but yeah, just that you're just doing it because that's what's expected or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what we want to avoid, right? I think for me, when I think about, so the way that I'm relating to what all of you are saying in terms of like the point of economic transaction is like the place where we have power. I'm worried about sort of like saying things that we can't deliver on. I'd flip that on its head, right? What can you deliver on? What can you ensure? What would it mean to be really public and really specific about what it is you're aiming to do. Because yeah, based on your different like market models, based on the size of your market, based on your own personal capacity and your structure, do you have staff? Do you have volunteers? There might be limits to what you're able to do effectively and well. And yes, it's true that that can actually cause harm when you're not doing it well. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing to be done. It's just a matter of figuring out what that is. So let's take a quick break, like a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we'll be talking a little bit about some of the goals and sort of initiatives that you all have actually done and thinking about like, okay, so how did we know this was strategic? Why did we decide to do this? What did our mission tell us about how we were doing this? And hopefully get a little bit more into, yeah, things that you all actually have achieved. All right, let's come back at 11 on the dot.
Question.
Yeah, please.
When this is unrelated to what we were just talking about, but when does the meeting workshop end? I had it on my schedule until 11.
Oh, fascinating.
Oh yeah, it's a 2-hour. It's a 2-hour.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure that way I'm planning accordingly.
Awesome. And it's okay if folks have to jump off. I totally understand how that happens. So, all
No, thank you.
right. See y'all in a few.
I do need to jump off, but I appreciate
worries.
the conversation. Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Yo. Okay, if you are back but not on camera, will you just type back in the chat box so that we know that you're here? Or you can throw up an emoji. Welcome back, welcome back. Okay. Beautiful. Welcome back, everybody. I had a little squirrel come up to my door on the break and ask me for some food. It was very, very cute. Okay. So we talked a little bit about mission statements. We talked a little bit about this, like maybe fear of our mission statements, not being able to deliver on our mission, right? And here is where I would shift our focus a little bit. So thinking about what can we do? What are some goals that we can craft that might help us fulfill our mission? What are some goals that we can craft that might help us fulfill our mission? Goals are sometimes a little bit easier too, because they're not necessarily something that's like going on your website or something that you have to build consensus around in your organization, right? But your mission is certainly instructive in helping you figure out how you are going to actually create equity in your community. So on slide 19 and 20, there's a couple of little slides here. And what I did with Amanda is I actually went to look at some of the past, current, and future hopes around DEIJ work that markets who are currently participating in the Double Up Food Bucks program shared. And so there's two that I kind of pulled out that I think are really good example of goals that are clear and specific. But I want to work backwards to understand why these goals might align with a market or a market's mission. Does anyone recognize these? I'm curious. So the two goals that I pulled out were support Black, Indigenous people of color and new businesses, and to reach Spanish-speaking communities. Do either of those goals sound familiar to you? Okay, awesome. Yeah, Lisa, tell me a little bit more. Like, are one of these your oh, it's interesting. My external monitor just went kaput. It was like, no, we don't do that anymore. Are these goals familiar to you because they're yours, or because you know a little bit about them, because maybe you've thought about them? Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, I think I've seen goals that are like similar to these two talked about a lot in like webinars or meetings and such. And yeah, I think for our market specifically, we have a goal to support BIPOC and new businesses.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about like why, how does that align with your market mission? Like, why did you choose that as a particular goal?
Yeah, so our mission, like I was saying before, I do kind of want to work on it.
Yeah.
But our mission does talk about specifically supporting our diverse community. And so I think having vendors that like represent people in our community like will help kind of bring more products that folks are familiar with and would help like support that kind of relationship building between our market and our vendors and the people that live in our neighborhood.
Yeah, that's an excellent case for doing that exact thing. Yeah. I also see Lacey saying there are things that me and my co-manager have been working toward as we can, but they're unfortunately nowhere in our mission statement or value statement that have been put together by our board. Yeah. I'm just going to imagine that you're not alone in that, Lacey. Does that resonate for anyone else? Yeah. And certainly I don't want to imply that if it's not in your mission statement, you can't do it. Sometimes it can be helpful to have that mission statement to give you instructions, and sometimes you kind of have to make your own. Like, I would advocate that it's possible that you could create a goal based on your interpretation of your own mission statement. Like, for instance, like, we support relationship building. Okay, you can make that more specific yourself. Like, definitely you could do that. We see the primary relationships here as being important because, and therefore we will, right? Like, you could certainly do that. What about this other goal to reach Spanish speaking communities? Folks were saying like, oh yeah, I've heard about that being talked about. Tell me a little bit more.
I think we often hear people asking like, how do we get things translated? And that's something people have asked OFMA for, like, how can we get easier access to translations? And then also a little bit of a fear of translating, people saying, I'm afraid of translating stuff because I don't actually speak Spanish. And then what if somebody comes to the market thinking that they'll be able to talk to people who work here who speak Spanish? So like both things.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? So maybe your goal is to get everything translated. That's certainly a good goal, right? Like, I saw that in some of that. I also saw some markets where, like, actually what we're prioritizing is making sure that we have staff who speak Spanish, making sure we have volunteers who speak Spanish, making sure that there are folks who can actually communicate with vendors in a language that they feel most comfortable with. Because that's important. That's important for building community, and it's important to make sure that there's equitable relationships with our vendors. So that's a really perfect example, right? Like, maybe you want to reach Spanish speaking communities, but there's two pretty different goals and they're going to achieve different ends. And that's exactly what we're hoping to understand a little bit more about, is like, we have our mission, and maybe you're even saying like, okay, I think our mission supports that we should reach out to Spanish speaking communities because, you know, for instance, like, there's a part of our community that is being left behind or that we're not reaching, but there might be different ways that you're achieving it. On slide 20, let's switch gears a little bit, because I'm getting the vibe that maybe we could. And I'm hoping that somebody might be able to be brave and talk a little bit about a goal that their market has. And then we can kind of like workshop it a little bit right here with everybody, talking about sort of how that fits into their mission. And then a little bit about like, okay, so what does your mission say about how you can achieve that goal? Does anyone have a goal that's related to equity that they're feeling like, I think I would like to workshop that a little bit right now? Alexis, I see that you're on mic. Does that mean that you have one?
Yeah.
I love it. Tell me what your goal is.
Yeah, so one of our goals, we recently got last year we got an FMPP grant that was written to lower the barrier to enter our specific market and try to bring in new vendors. Specifically BIPOC, women-owned farms, people who have not been able to access buying land but want to start farming. And the whole grant revolves around us bringing 15 vendors over the next 3 years, and are all subsidized, equipment, booth fees, and such. So it's not necessarily a goal attached to our mission as an organization, but it's a goal attached to a grant that we have committed to over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And something that I'm hoping, and the board as well, is hoping that comes out of the grant once the grant is over, is that we can adopt some of those practices that we put into place while the grant was active, and kind of adopt that into our mission, into our core values, and how we continue to do business as an organization moving forward. So that's something that we're really hoping that we can carry through even after the grant, when the grant is done.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, of, you know, and I think you said a little bit about this, and I'm sure for other folks on this call, this might be kind of like something that you might take for granted, but why do you think, like, why is it important based on like what your market is here to do? Why is it important to bring in BIPOC women-owned farms or folks who haven't been able to access land to farm?
Why is it important to the organization, or just in grants?
Oh, yeah, to the organization. Yeah, to like to what you're hoping to do in your community.
Well, I think we recognize that it is difficult to navigate the politics and the bureaucracy of joining a market. Not just the application process or getting familiar with like market rules and stuff like that, but um more like systematically, like how to get insurance, how to have the funds to get equipment, how to navigate ODA and stuff like that. So we're just hoping that if the market acts as a resource center and we'll be able to not only help vendors who are underserved or farmers who are underserved, but expand, I suppose, our membership to be more representative of the whole community. It's one thing when you're trying to reach customers who don't speak English or try to make the market more inviting to people of color or really make it feel more welcome to people of color. But if those customers are not seeing themselves represented in the vendors, then there's a big disconnect there. So I think that for me personally, that's an important part of why we're doing this work.
So I did a little bit of like synthesis of what you said, but I almost wrote down almost verbatim what you said. We recognize that navigating the bureaucracy of joining a market is a barrier to many people. If the market can be a resource, oh, interesting, autocorrected something. Well, that's frustrating, but if the market can be, I have no idea, autocorrect. If the market, we will not only be able to help vendors who aren't otherwise able to participate, but we can expand our membership to be reflective of our whole community. When customers don't see themselves as represented in their vendors, their relationships are less likely to be built. Now, I recognize that like that may or may not be related to your mission, but like that in and of itself is sort of like that could be its own mission statement in and of itself. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is because it's demonstrating who you're here for. So rather than just using a word like community or like vendors or our food systems, like you were really specific about what impact you want to be able to make, and why you see that as being important for your market. Because like you said, there's like a variety of different ways that you might go about reaching your community and sort of like being a part of your community. But there's something really important about the relationships between vendors and the people who are buying from vendors. And so, when there isn't a connection, when there isn't like an ability to communicate and build a relationship with one another, then it's just, you're less likely to have a community market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, do you folks have questions for Alexis about that goal and sort of like how their market landed on that goal? This is like a perfect opportunity to like learn from one of your peers and be like, oh, interesting. I wonder if I could do that, or I wonder why you did that.
Do y'all have a like an equity statement that talked specifically about this goal, and then this was kind of an action from that?
We don't actually, no. I mean the grant itself, the grant narrative does have an equity statement, but our organization, our handbook or our bylaws don't have specifically an equity statement. And just like you, Lisa, we are also in the middle of a strategic planning. And this is something that we're hoping that comes out of it. In the past, I think our board and whoever the founders of the market were thought that by keeping the bylaws and the mission statement as vague as possible, it would allow more flexibility with what we can do with our policies and stuff like that, which makes sense and it is true. But I think we're trying to shift our perspective into, if we embed our mission statement and our bylaws with more equity, through a more equity lens or goals, whoever comes after us has something to fall back on. And you're kind of ensuring that the policies that move forward can be tied to a more specific mission statement, rather than hoping that the people who are managing the market are going to work on those things on their own. So that's something that we're trying to do, but it's not easy. It's not easy to come to a consensus on things, especially when you're talking about like changing the bylaws where 100 members have to vote before we can actually make a move, you know. But no, that statement is written into the grant, not our mission.
Yeah. Still, I mean, like, it sounds like there's kind of a dialectic that you're working with, which is that like it's important to have those things articulated officially, and also like there is still flexibility and opportunity to sort of like achieve some of these goals, even if like our mission statement or our bylaws are lagging behind that particular thing. I'm curious, like, I mean, and I know that you might be speculating, but like, is the fear about sort of like having a lot of specificity around equity like a concern in terms of like a business model? Like, oh, like if we're specifying that we're going to work with, for instance, like mostly BIPOC and like new vendors, that's going to like limit what our market can do, or like limit like some of the like legacy vendors that we have coming into our market. Like what's the fear, or what's the risk of being specific there?
I'm not sure exactly for each individual board member what the fear is, but I think in general, our board is hesitant to change anything.
Okay.
And it's yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say our board is very informed in equity changes. I think that sometimes the fear of doing it wrong, or the fear of just rocking the boat or changing things, it's paralyzing, or freezing to us. But I'm not sure. I think that the want is there. It's just the how to, which is why we're hiring a consultant to really help us through this work.
Yeah. Strategic planning is a fantastic opportunity to like literally do like a long form thing of like what we're doing right now, like, to be think about how you're operationalizing your mission and like what equity has to do with that.
Yeah. And up to recently, I think a lot of farmers markets where we're operating with, like, we run a market, we're here for the vendors, we open the market, close the market. And I think it's a new thing that markets are taking on more of a responsibility as to how we impact our community. So I think that shift is happening, but in the language in our policies and our mission statements and all that, it's not really being represented yet. But so that's something that the board and I talk a lot, is like, before it was simple, right? We run a market, we open it, we're here for the vendors. And as we're shifting to doing more stuff, yeah, we're trying to reflect that in our literature.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I would argue, right, that like if relationship or community are mentioned in a market's mission, I'm like, okay, well then like your responsibility is greater. But again, like that's, I have a very specific viewpoint, and that's fair. That's fair. And so like I see you like operationalizing that. I see Lucinda saying, I resonate with your goal. Woodstock started a pilot program this year to lower barriers for BIPOC and beginning businesses with a 50% discount for stall fees, and a try it out mindset for vendors to not feel so locked in. And I think our next steps need to be transparency of work on our website and more formal forms of feedback with the vendors who participated. Yeah, Lucinda, I'm wondering if like you could come on a little bit or come on, Mike, and talk a little bit about like why you chose that as a goal for your market.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, for sure.
Had to do a little bit of gymnastics with the computer for the mic.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So
um,
why did your market decide on that as a goal? Like what was your goal in doing that pilot program? Were you just like, yeah, this seems like a good thing to try? Or like was there a particular thing that you were hoping to accomplish with it?
it came out of we have a DEI committee at the Woodstock Market, and when we were doing our planning for the next year, we put together like a big goal, medium goal, and small goal. And this was our big goal. I think it was mostly, we want to see more representation in the market for our shoppers who, to feel more of a connection with their community. Um, and we were thinking like, how can we foster an environment where, like if we keep going along the way that we have been, then we likely won't be attracting more diverse vendors to the market because we're lacking it right now. So this was like our first step of how can we outwardly say, we want to invite more representation in the market, and will this potentially help us achieve that goal?
Yeah. How did you see that goal as like tied to your mission? Or did you? Is it like different from your mission right now?
Um, yeah, I think so our mission, the third thing that we say in our mission is we want to represent community diversity and strengthen neighborhood relationships
Yeah.
through our support of local farmers. So it's like it's kind of goes with that, like how are we supporting our vendors, and how are we representing community diversity?
Yeah. I'm just writing down what you're saying. How we support our vendors and what?
And how do we represent kind of community diversity?
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. I'm just looking back a little bit at like what you wrote. I'm curious, like what if you were to think about like what the next step in this particular goal would be, like where do you see this going in the future?
Yeah,
You-
that's what I'm hoping to get a little bit more official on at the end of the season, is like, so our goal is to have these drop-in vendors become, full-time vendors and who are invested in the market. And this year was like a really easy thing for a lot of them to do. And I was like, okay, well, maybe, we're capturing a more established, like, vendor base, and we need to be providing more things, like we can provide a tent, or we can, help you along the like insurance process, like for vendors who are still on like that outside and like that cusp of coming into a farmer's market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for being willing to share a little bit more about sort of like why that was important for your market and like why you started there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lacey, I'm curious, like, are you in a place where you can come on mic? Because I'm curious about, you're saying, that you're hoping to get materials translated, but it might not make as much sense for your particular market. And I'm curious, like, if you would be willing to like come on mic and talk a little bit about some of the goals that you do have, or like how you like why you picked translation as a goal if you're like, well, I'm not really sure it makes as much sense.
Sure. Yeah. We have a quite a number of Hispanic vendors. And so it was more about serving our current population in the language that they speak and understand the best, because I know that some of them have family members that help them translate and maybe aren't always comfortable speaking with us at the market. Olivia and I both speak some Spanish, and so we do try to communicate with them in Spanish, but we want to make sure that our materials are available to them so that, number one, they understand our rules and our policies and the things that we're changing every year and the things that we expect of them. We want to make sure that that's really clear and understandable for them. And also that they feel more welcome in our market. We want them to be able to ask questions, but in order for them to be able to ask questions, they have to know what they need to ask questions about. And I feel like if all of our materials are in English and they're just trying to get, maybe their child or their nephew or something to translate for them, maybe they're not really getting everything. And so they don't know maybe that they have questions they need to ask or things they need to clarify. So our translation efforts really are geared at our current vendors and then any other potential vendors that apply. But sort of that thinking about the goals made me realize that, I don't feel like I see a lot of Hispanic shoppers coming into our market. And so our vendor population is maybe not necessarily reflective of the population that's actually shopping at the market, which is really interesting to me. I did have one of our Hispanic vendors tell me that he believes 80% of our customer base speaks Spanish, because he says he'll start speaking and they'll speak back in Spanish. And he's like, yeah, 80% of, your Hillsdale speak Spanish. And I was like, that's great. And they're also like, we are a very homogenous community. Like, we're really a white, middle, upper class community in this particular neighborhood. And it just hasn't really yet become a goal for us, I think, to bring in and seek out really more Hispanic communities. With our Double Up Food Bucks outreach and things like that, we were trying to hit all the different community centers and all the different, centers of faith and things like that. But really our translation goals were more centered around, let's make things more equitable for the folks that we already have so that they feel more welcome and more comfortable at our market.
Yeah, right. And I mean, again, I think that's like a perfect example of like, okay, so you recognize that there's more work to do, right? Because there's obviously community members who right now aren't accessing your market, and that's like a part of your mission and a part of like what you're here to do. And at the same time, like, your market is succeeding at building relationships between vendors and between like shoppers and the people who are like consuming those items. And like, it certainly makes sense that like, as a matter of equity and as a matter of like strengthening those relationships, like you can support vendors through translating your materials. And it sounds like you have like other things in the works to like think about like, okay, like how do we shift like who's able to access our markets too? But yeah. Okay. I'm going to pause for just a second. And see what questions or thoughts are coming up for you as we've been having this conversation about mission, and sort of like fulfilling that mission through goals that are focused on equity.
I think something that came up for me when I think Alexis was talking about like wanting to change your market's mission or wanting to do work, but no one's doing it, or there's like people are like afraid to change. I think for me, when there are now a lot of resources in the world and like the anti-racist farmers market toolkit, where it's like, oh, here's like some step-by-step action items to take to do this work. But it's a lot. and it's time consuming, and it requires a lot of relationships to already be built also. And I think markets, a lot of people are just part-time, and I recently went from working at markets to now I don't actually work at the markets anymore. And I've just, when you work a market every week, it takes so much brain space just to survive. Because you're doing physical stuff and this and then that happens. And so it's hard to have just like brain capacity to do work beyond like your financials and your maps and stuff, and the actual like physical aspect of the market.
Yeah. I see Rachel saying that is resonating. I'm curious, Rachel, how like that's come up for you. Or, oh, did I see someone? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah. I'm not currently a market manager, but I have been in the past. And just from working with markets, know that like so many folks are doing this work part-time or volunteer based. There's a lot of turnover in the position. So sometimes that just like makes momentum really difficult to build if you have a lot of staff changes. And yeah, it can often feel like this is an extra thing that gets added onto your plate as a market manager as staff. And I guess the kind of reframing that I always try to encourage folks to do is just like think about how we can be integrating this into everything that we're doing with the market. And yeah, so that it doesn't feel like extra work, but that it's like part of your decision-making framework, your policies, your goals, your programs. It's all integrated throughout.
Yeah. Yeah, and that requires a lot of infrastructure. I'm like, oh, I wonder what the board's role could be in that. But again, it's like if it's already challenging, like working with the board, like or the board is already like sort of like seeing their like position as like really specific and maybe aren't necessarily seeing that as like an active role for them, that can be really challenging. I love like normally I'm like, oh, normally I would hesitate to sort of like have grants be a place where sort of like you are adding goals in that aren't necessarily already a part of your work. But I really love the idea that like Alexis was saying is like, yeah, what we did is we selected a grant that like necessitated us moving towards equity and necessitated us taking taking on a body of work that was going to be specifically funded for that. And like that as a way of sort of like structuring into your work important initiatives that are going to shift your market and help you achieve your mission. Oh, I see Julia saying from the Vancouver Farmers Market, like one of the goals that they have is to create an equity plan, and they've reached out to some DEI consultants, but they're wondering if anyone has suggestions on resources that we could use in creating a plan. I'm going to let that hang for a second and see if anyone does have any thoughts, but also like a welcome to connect afterward. I have some thoughts, Julia, and like would be happy to connect with you afterward, like for sure.
That would be great, thanks. And if anyone has any DEI consultants they've worked with and felt like they got something really tangible and helpful out of that experience, we would love to hear that from people too.
Yeah. See, Lucinda saying, I'm wondering if a mission could include a statement like we seek learning opportunities for growth as an organization. It's not specific, but it does speak to a broad goal. Yeah, I mean, I think again, it all depends upon like what you're hoping for your mission statement to do for you. Like maybe that's part of your values, right? Like we value growth and we and therefore we will, you know. Okay, other thoughts about or ways that you're relating to equity, goals, and your mission? Amanda, is there anything that you want to say as we sort of like move towards closing?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm just over here being like, for like the last hour, like just really so much warm heartedness towards all these market managers that are doing so much in their jobs. And just again, like the director level and vision holding level that a lot of them are doing of, sneaking the vegetables into the chocolate cake or something like that, and how you guys are finding ways to be change makers in your organization and pull things along when the bureaucracy part of it is making it hard for you or isn't so supportive. And I am hoping that like you come to these sessions and get support by seeing other people like you doing the same thing and getting some love from that. I really admire everything that you guys are doing. So yeah. I'm just a lot of hearts for you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
I said this in the chat, but just in case you didn't see it, Sunny, I wanted to say thank you for the exercise of here's your goal and how does it relate to your mission? Because I think a lot of times we'll have this goal because it's just in our head is like, oh yeah, this is something that we should be doing because of, whatever our own personal biases.
Exactly.
And so it's a good exercise to be like, oh yeah, that's why we're doing this. And it's a better way to like be able to bring other people in or bring the board in or type thing. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to move us towards closing. I'm going to give us just like 2 minutes of quiet. Well, not quiet. I'm going to play some music, but 2 minutes of quiet if you'd like it, to integrate the things that we've been talking about and think about what might you like to do with this? And this is just for you. So if you're like, actually, the thing that I'm taking away from this is nothing that we were talking about today, that's totally fine. But we're just going to have 2 minutes of integration just to like think about what you might like to do with this. Okay. As we move towards closing, there's a couple of things that I want to draw your attention to. One is at the end of this slide deck, we have a survey. I'm going to ask you to fill it out in a moment. So if you aren't already there, go ahead and go down to slide 23. There's a survey, but not quite yet. Before we fill out that survey, as a closing exercise, I'm curious if you can pop into the chat. What is a new question that you have? What is a new question that you have after this conversation today? I'll give you a few moments to type that. See 3 questions. What goals should be set based off of our mission? I might even say add to that, Lisa, how can our mission instruct us on how to achieve the goals that we already have too? Are there trainings like this that we specifically can get for market boards? I'm so inspired by these webinars, but I'm not a board member or decision maker. Oh yeah, on the level of mission statements and values. So it can be hard to bridge the gap when it doesn't seem that the board is interested or invested in this work. Oh my gosh, yes. How do we build community around food? And what does that mean? And what does that look like? How can I get more vegetables into the chocolate cake? Yes. Okay. With that, I'm going to direct your attention to the survey. I'm going to ask you to open it right now. I'm not going to make you fill it out while we're on screen, but I am going to ask you to open it. I'm going to ask you to click on that link and open that survey. And as soon as we close, it'll probably take about 5 minutes, really, maybe 10, for you to fill out the survey. And with that, I say thank you, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.